Hope you're all well and you can all hear me okay. Is everyone well? So we've got a few people here from around the world. So let me have a quick look at who we have here. Per Ola, welcome. And hello to Sweden. Hello, RC. Good to see you. Who else do we have here? From Copenhagen, wonderful Denmark. Hello. Hello from Germany. Hello, Flum from Canada. Hello. More from Germany. And we've got questions already. So, why do many dragons everywhere in the UK Wales have so many? So many crests and coat of arms. We can approach that later. So, this is going to be a chat. We've got a few questions I've been given beforehand, which I'm going to answer for you all, and we can answer other things as we go along. If there are super chats, you don't have to, but if there are super chats, I'll try and answer them first, or in priority after I've answered the questions that I've already been given. I've been given some really interesting questions by many of you people from Patreon and the YouTube members, as well as on sort of YouTube comments and Twitter. So yes, I hope you're all good. We've got people from the Pacific Northwest. Hello. Let everybody carry on joining for a minute or two because it's only just hit 8 o'clock. I have to say thank you to my son Ben, who is moderating. I hope. Hopefully, he won't have much work to do because he'll tend to be really happy here. So yeah, if you're on YouTube, you'll see that people are getting numbers by their names. I think that's something to do with how many comments you make and your ranking. I'm not overly sure, but it's nothing to worry about. But just to let you know, in case you're wondering why you're getting those things in the chat. People from the Netherlands here. Should we give him work? No, please don't give my son work. I think he just wants to chill this evening. He's a reluctant employee of Crickenfold this evening. Indeed, Benjamin making the Benjamins. He is making the Benjamins. And in fact, he's Benjamin. So you're probably... and this fifth far is Ben. I don't know. I don't even know my son's ID. So I hope you're well. There's some really wonderful things. So just to give you an idea what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about flood myths. I'm going to talk about the mythology database and how I think it is going to change the study of folklore forever because of something we're about to do. So something really massive, and I'll give you a hint on that. And then we've got a few other questions from Balder and dragons and other things going on with Proto-Indo-Europeans and cosmogony and beliefs and religion. As well as a little chat about witches and things. So I hope that sounds good. Yes, it's a family stream, although he won't be saying much. I'm not too sure. I don't think he's overly interested. In fact, when I remember talking to my children, now I was calling children, they're young men, about doing Crickenfold, their opinion was no one's going to watch it, Dad. No one's interested in Indo-European mythology. And they then used to go through comparing the size of the viewership with football stadiums. And now they realise I can sell out sort of Wembley Stadium in London. So they are now more impressed than they were. But yeah, so it's been a great journey. And they try to help. People from hello, India. Christopher from India. Gothenburg, hello. And so where shall we start? I'm going to start with flood myths, and I'll tell you why I'm going to start with some flood myths. And that is because my next video I'm going to release on YouTube will be on flood myths. And I've done a video before a few years ago, but there's a lot of feedback saying it was quite messy, didn't make sense. So I've remade it. I've literally recorded it. I may well record it again because sometimes when you make a video and you talk to the camera, I go off topic a lot and I witter on a lot, and it's a lot of editing. So if I can make a a video without me going off topic and wittering. That would be a lot easier to edit. And there's at least 90 minutes of me talking about flood myths, but I do cover everything. And the other thing I want to say was, before I talk about flood myths a bit more, is that it does irk me somewhat when I see some YouTube videos talking about flood myths who really clearly haven't done any significant research. And there's a YouTube channel who I've been told about a few times, called the Resurrectionists, who talk about nursery rhymes, and they do a reasonably good job, well produced, and that's what their thing is, easy to listen to. And they posted a video about flood myths the other day, saying it was a 10,000-year-old story that every culture has. And then on top of that, I actually had someone in my comments who used AI to analyze my script and give me feedback, critical feedback, using AI, and whilst AI is reasonably good at science and maths and computer programming and general knowledge, when it needs to get into the depths of the humanities, it stumbles somewhat. He critiqued me, saying all my work was based on Witzel, and that would be Michael Witzel, professor at Harvard on Vedic Studies, which it wasn't. It was Julien Dehoux and Jean-Luc Lequelec, who have done some of the best work there. And then he said that every culture in the world had flood myths, and in fact, flood myths were more popular than the hero's journey, which it isn't. And I can show you that as part of we're going to change folklore forever. But really, the hero's journey is probably between 25 to 50% of stories you could say were hero journey-esque, but 1% of stories have floods in them. And even then, there are different types of flood myths. And the flood myths are not told by all cultures across the world. And flood myths are definitely over 10,000 years old. I mean, we see people like Hancock and other, call them journalists, or whatever you want to call them, but certainly not archaeologists or geologists, saying that the flood myth came from the Younger Dryas period or the melting of the waters from the last glacial maximum. But again, that is just rubbish. We can show clearly that flood myths were being told before that. Flood myths were being told when humans left Africa 45,000 years ago. Now, they left Africa before that, I know, but the batch of humans that left Africa 45,000 years ago, which we can see their DNA, which spread across the world, they had flood myths with them. And in fact, some of their stories, because the stories they tell are made up of different components, some of those components are much, much older than that. So, but that's what my video will tell you. But it's also going to go over the other types of flood myths, such as floods where sea levels do rise and there's a change in geography, and we have stories that we can see have facts in them that the landscape has changed. So there's been a passing down over generations. We hear this in Australia particularly, but there's other areas we see people talk about American myths. I know Stefan Milo did a video once about, is this the eldest story ever? Talking about a collapsed volcano. I think that's in Oregon, that story. But we even have stories like this even in the United Kingdom. In England, there's a story of a hunter traveling across Scotland, where now that land is two islands that we've seen between. And that was 8,000 years ago when that flooded. So there are flood myths where the sea levels rise, and there are flood myths when it rains a lot, and there are flood myths when it rains so much, sea levels rise, everyone dies. But luckily, some people are rescued on a boat, and then sea levels recede, and life starts again, like a new creation. And when people say, the flood myths told all over the world, they're referring normally to that latter story, which is that the world rains a lot, floods, people get on a boat, and then the flood recedes and they can start again. Which, if you think about it, if you have a story where it rains a lot and you need people to survive, of course they're going to build a boat to go on it. It isn't like, oh my God, they must be telling the same myth. It's just human nature that you want to build something to float on. to do that. So that's what we're going to talk about next anyway, a flood myth for the video. So I hope you're looking forward to that. I'm hoping I can release that to YouTube members and patrons this week. And so that'll be on YouTube either next weekend or the weekend after. I tend to give patrons and YouTube members an extra few days or week to watch videos before they go on YouTube. So let me just quickly catch up on chat. Hello, France and Australia. Wow. What else is going on? Let's see. It's all right. I can't see any questions. Lots of people talk about Floodstow. And oh yes, myths around Doggerland. I don't think so. Doggerland is Britain used to be connected to mainland Europe with a landmass which we now call Doggerland, and is actually today referred to as Dogger Bank. So it's a shallow under the North Sea, and fishermen trawlers used to scoop up things like mammoth tusks and bones, and people wondered why they're in the North Sea. And it came to light that sea levels were lower, so this land appeared. But there aren't any specific stories I'm aware relating to Doggerland. But there are some to others, and I say I will hint at those and give lots of references. I'm really proud of the sort of structure I've got for the video, so hopefully you'll really like that. It's going back to all my old videos where I give hints of stories for all the different scenarios, as well as explain the whole thing and why we believe flood myths started when and where they did. So hopefully you'll like that. So that was my little rant about flood myths, and whilst you may see great videos on YouTube saying about them, they're often not well researched. So that is all. So let's go on to questions. First one is around modern witches versus folk magic. So for those who do follow me on Patreon and YouTube, I had a little rant a couple of weeks ago about modern witches. And so let me talk about this a bit more and answer the question. Is there a difference between a witch and someone who practices folk magic? So my view on this is that folk magic tends to be practiced by people we would perhaps consider good witches. And so if we go back in time to, let's say, 1,000 years ago, if you were the kind of person who couldn't help your community in a traditional way, such as labor in the fields, agricultural farming, that kind of thing, you wouldn't have had a very good life, because you wouldn't be able to support yourself, and you'd probably end up starving to death. And this would also count if you were part of a family. Let's say if you were just a woman married to a man and the man died, then that's half your sort of physical resource to do things gone, and so it's maybe harder to look after your children and so there's this scenario where you see these people, men and women, who are left alone, who can't contribute, maybe because they are old, maybe because they have some illness, maybe mental illness, maybe physical problems, and there are different ways the community would have treated them. But without doubt, if they were certainly on the older side, it's chances are the community would have some respect for them and try and offer them favors in a traditional sense of the word in sense of like food or items, and in return that person may try to help them, either give them advice or offer them sort of crafts they had done, or maybe even tell stories or magical spells. I mean, stories are as much spells as saying hocus pocus. The narrative is magic in a sense. So that is where I feel the sort of folk magic is, and where witches sort of came from. I mean, witches tend to sort of early pre-first, or in the first millennium, certainly in Europe and the Germanic type of witch, let's say, which I'm more familiar with, they had a sense of prophecy about them as well. They could tell the future. They were known for that as much as this sort of folklore magic. But I think what happened is then when the church comes along, It sees these people, and it sees people going to them rather than coming to the church for help. And it considers what they do evil or bad, and then witches get a bad name. And so witches then get associated with evil as opposed to what they were, which is just people in the community helping. And that's where we get that sort of split between folklore magic and witchcraft, I guess you'd call it. But then what I find, one, I think that's better in the treatment of witches then in the Middle Ages was atrocious, or what people would label as witches. And you certainly didn't get people saying, I'm a witch, because they would have been hung, drowned, burnt, or jailed or something. It wasn't a self-proclaimed thing. People were given the label of a witch or a magical person or a wise person by the community they were in because of the deeds they'd done. It was something almost awarded to them, I would say. It wasn't self-proclaimed. So when we come to today and, a small section of the witch community, I mean, and anybody could call themselves a witch if they feel like they're a witch or magical within them, but there's a small section that really are grifters in the sense of the word, that they maybe don't even feel the magic, but yet they feel free that they can sell spells on eBay or Etsy and the like. And I feel that is almost like a betrayal of the craft. And even though I'm not a non-believer and I have no belief in magic or gods, I don't know. To me, it's just like there's some romance and nostalgia about these sorts of things, about old religious ways and ritual behaviour and magic that is quite precious. And so when you see people abuse it, it's a bit weird. It's the same with religion, and you just get preachers in the United States of mega churches flying in their private jets and limousines, and people giving tithes, and it's just like, is that really what your God wanted? I don't know. Anyway, I see a super chat, so let me come to that. Can I use my computer to show that? So this is from Howard. Thank you, Howard. Is there a difference between flying dragons and ocean dragons, and why are some dragons wingless and live in the underworld? That is a great question. So let me talk about dragons, because one of the other questions I had is biblical dragons, about Leviathan and what's the story behind that. So let me talk about dragons for you, Howard. So there are different types of dragons, and initially dragons tended to be water, I don't know, controllers of water. So dragons and snakes in real life were found by water, and so that you get this association of them together. And we see that the earliest creation myths have dragons with water, dragons carving out the land, and they make it rain, and then life comes out of that. And we see that as the rain snake in South Africa, and we see that as the rainbow serpent in Australia. There's stories there where they carve out the land, make it rain, and things grow. And then that is the way of life. Dragons are life givers. They were good things to the world. But then humans needed water. I mean, we always need water, don't get me wrong, but you can get too much water, which you have the flood myths. But and you get dragons in there. And this is what sort of happens, is that when we actually need water for things like crops, and the dragon isn't giving us water, then we think, well, you're a bad dragon. Why aren't you giving us water? We want water. And so we have to send someone to beat the dragon up to get us water. And so who better to do that? Because when you're fighting a dragon, there's thunder and there's lightning up in the clouds as you try and make it rain. And so that's a storm god. And so we have lots of stories of storm gods fighting dragons, again, associated with water. So then what happens is that when we don't need water so much and we need them for something else, and so after agricultural farming, we have pastoral farming, and the dragon steals cows, because cows are the most important thing for pastoral farmers. the dragon no longer needs to be associated with water. It's associated with land and hiding in mountains. And so you start seeing the need for a winged dragon and a water-based dragon disappear in a way, and the dragon could be more of a serpent creature or runs across the land. It could still have wings. It may just not necessarily fly as much in the pastoral world. So you see an evolution of a dragon, although we also see that different cultures have it. So the dragon in Asia has almost, I'd say, human features. So the face is more human. If you look at a Chinese dragon, well, it looks maybe more like a dog or something. There are pictures of them more of human heads, and you actually see this in Europe as well, probably in the early Middle Ages. But before then, dragons were more what we would call wyverns. So I almost forgot that word. So wyverns had 2 legs and 2 wings, as opposed to the dragons most of us assume to be sort of 4 legs and 2 wings, or 4 legs, like in the Chinese dragon. It's there's some differences there. So it's just, there's cultural differences, there are environmental differences and social differences that all help to evolve the dragon. In terms of the underworld dragon, that's a great question. And I think that's more to do with the serpent. So the serpent's more associated with underground and evil, and serpents tend to be without wings, snake-like. And that's possibly also because of burrowing as well. Because they're underground, there's probably an association that they're more like worms than that. And in fact, one of our oldest words, we can reconstruct what we call an ultra-conserved word, so a word that has been consistent throughout human history. So we have an ultra-conserved word of around 20,000 years ago of worm, and worm you could really associate with dragon. So yeah, it's a story that's been going on for, well, I was saying, since literally we've had creation myths. It's one of the earliest ones, the one with the dragon. So hopefully that answered your question and why we see different evolution of the dragon going on. Now, also very much aware there's lots of chat happening. Now, I have to let you know, because some people have been upset with me before. When I talk to you all, I have no idea what's going on in chat. I don't read the chat, and I can't keep an eye on it because there's lots going on. I'm thinking, so if you are saying things to me in chat and I don't see it, I apologise. The super chats flash up big colours and I see them, so they're easy to answer. What I'll do at the end of this, me going through all the questions, which at this rate may be Tuesday morning, we can go back and look at the chat and see if there's anything great in there. If you, because I know some of you put Q or question at the front, which helps. So, but let me carry on with some of the other questions I've got. So the other one I got about was and dragons is Leviathan. So if you're not familiar with this, in Job 40 or Job 41, depending on the version of the Bible you read, you'll see that Job is talking to God, or God is telling Job how he defeated a dragon, how he was much stronger than a dragon, and people think that to be sort of like a Leviathan type figure. I mean, you see this happen in the Bible. Where does the Leviathan come from? Well, to me, Leviathan is a water serpent, and it is the serpent that is used to create the earth in many of the older creation myths, and it is in effect Tiamat from the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian or Sumerian creation myth. So Marduk defeats Tiamat and creates the firmament of the land. It's like a world for people, and that's sort of a version of the creation myth with the dragon. And the Bible is significantly influenced by the Enuma Elish. Certainly in the Old Testament and in Genesis, we see lots of phrasing and the like that almost has literally come from the Enuma Elish. And I certainly believe verses 1, 2, I think it is, and 1, 3 of the Bible, maybe includes 1, 1, where you see the wind blow over the deep, is in effect a synopsis of the Enuma Elish. And so, in effect, the Bible was given a nod that Tiamat has been defeated by Marduk to create the world when the Bible starts, because the Bible, even though it says in the beginning this happened, what it really should say is when we start the story of the Bible, this has happened. So that's my feelings on Leviathan and dragons for you all. Let me just have a quick look, see if there's any questions there. Yes, and people talk about Mythgard, the Mythgard serpent and Jungandr. So yes, so when we talk about the Proto-Indo-Europeans and the dragon changed to a dragon that was on land and took cattle, what is strange is that, or strange, interesting is probably a better word, is that in the old Norse tales of Jungandr, the Mythgard serpent, which encircles the earth and keeps the water in, so associated with water, the actual story we have, we're most famous of, is with Thor, who went fishing. So Thor stays at Hymir's house, I think it is, and who's a giant, or Hymir's grandfather's house. Anyway, he's there. He's this guy. So the Jotun doesn't know it's Thor, otherwise, because Thor hates Jotuns and Jotuns hate Thor, and they would have beaten each other up and killed each other. But Thor's in disguise, and you have to treat your guests nicely. So Thor's pretended to, disguise, comes in, he's treated like a guest, and the giant says, "I'm going fishing," and Thor said, "Oh, can I come?" And the giant says, "Whatever." He says, "I need some bait," and the giant says, "Well, use something," and Thor goes out and kills the giant's cattle, and he kills the giant's best cattle and gets the head of the cattle as bait to go fishing to catch the Jormungandr. And that is in effect a reflex of the cattle raiding myth. So where usually the dragon takes the cattle and the hero then has to kill the dragon to get the cattle back, here the hero kills the cattle to catch the dragon. So it's a really interesting story. I've made videos about it, but hopefully that answers some of the questions about that too. So there's... I'm just trying to see if there's any other dragon things. No, right. So let me go on to question 3, which, whilst we're talking about Old Norse tales, someone mentioned about Valhalla and the fact that if you die, is dying in battle the only way to go to Valhalla? Well, I have some bad news. Dying in battle, if you were a Viking, didn't guarantee you going to Valhalla. You only got a 50-50 shot of going to Valhalla at best, because there was you split the dead. So not only one did you have to die in battle, but two, you only had a 50-50 chance of going there. So it does, well, I'll talk about modern witches and sort of misrepresenting sort of magic in certain ways. I get frustrated by people who say they were Viking and have beliefs in Old Norse, and when they die, everybody says, "Oh, they're going to Valhalla." Well, that's to me, that's not respecting the mythology, the religious beliefs at the time, because you had to die in battle, and only then you had a 50% chance of going. So I've made a couple of videos about how certain religions misrepresent things, and that's maybe not a significant one, and you can change your beliefs and your beliefs in the mythology and what it really meant, and as time changes, religion changes to adapt to the times, because all religion is it's probably a bit blasé, but myth is just cultural reflection as divine projection, which I've spoken about before. So you have feelings of why the world is what it is. You write a story saying the gods say the world is this, and then people later on then read saying, "Oh, God said that. That's right. That's what we believe." So yeah, it's a very... It can be frustrating, but someone wants to talk about Valhalla, and hopefully that answers the Valhalla question. Yes, you can. There are other places you can go as well when you died. Many places. So there's lots of questions. Someone is there questions? All right, it's nothing. Nothing great. So done floods. Right. So the next question about, again, this is a more Indo-European one. There's a fair few Indo-Europeans, but that's fine. About Rita. Now, if you don't know what Rita is, it's a Vedic word for how they're, like good and evil, how the cosmos was balanced. And the question was, is that an Indo-European thing? Is there something like that? And yes, we see in the earliest Indo-European creation myth that uh, a person, a primordial being, a man, was killed to create the world. And then after that, we have sacrifice, so that when someone's born, it is such that they are being built from parts of that world to rebuild a man. And you sacrifice men or people or animals or whatever to give back to the world. So there's this cycle that you give back what you take. And so where we have Drita in Vedic, we have Asa in the Zoroastrian. You also have in Greek, or Latin, I think it's called R, which is like order, and you have harmony as well. It sort of comes to that word, comes to that. And you have word or weird, you can pronounce it either way, in the Germanic beliefs, which is like fate. So this belief that the world, or the cosmos has an order to it, and that you have to sacrifice to keep that order. So I hope that makes sense. I've made a fair few videos on the Indo-European creation myth and talking about various parts of it. So where I hope it makes sense. I mean, some of you may know this through my videos, but as I say, there's this primordial being whose body is made to create the world. His bones and rocks, his flesh is soil, his blood is the sea. So you have these homologies linking sort of the body to a divine process of creating a planet. And then if a baby is born, theoretically a bit of soil and a bit of water and some rocks have been taken to make the bones and flesh and blood to make the baby. And then so they grow up and you sacrifice. And you get this sort of, say, this order, this balance of things. And then we see this further in things like medicine. So if you're going bald, for example, they suggest you get this a plant because grass or the hair of the Ymir or Yimo or whatever turned into grass. So if you get grass and put it on your head, or a special plant, put it on your head, your hair should grow. If you had a broken bone, they would tape stones to it, so the stones would help your bones grow. And there's all sorts of things like this just to reflect that belief. And I've made a few videos on medicine. They weren't overly well received because it doesn't seem like an interesting subject. But if you're really deep into the cosmogony and the belief system and the balance of things, then those 3 videos are made on, I think I'll probably call it healing or medicine or going bald or something. Well worth watch. Really interesting, really interesting. So, yes, I to see some Mark saying you've got a 50% chance of getting into Valhalla after giving up your all in battle isn't a catchy thing. You're right, you can't really sell Valhalla so easy on that. And that's quite interesting. Actually, talking of fate and Valhalla, then that's an interesting one. So Vikings would not shy from battle. And they would not shy from battle because of fate, such that you were going to die when you died. So if fate had decided for you, they believed anyway, if fate had decided for you, you weren't going to die today, you could go into battle and you wouldn't die. But if fate had decided you were going to die today and you decided not to go into battle, you think, oh, if I don't go into battle, then how can I die? You would still die because it's fated. So there was a really strong belief in word or weird and fate, because it made them want to fight, because there was no point not fighting. That's why you were quite happy to die in battle. It was a really interesting society and belief system. So that's why that's connected. I hope that makes sense. 1 second, let me get a cup of tea. It's probably very cold. Very cold. Right. So I'll talk about one more myth, and then I'm going to show you the mythology database and something that I think is going to change how we study folklore for a long time to come. And that was a question I had about Nana. So we're not talking Peter Pan here. We are talking Nana from the mythology of Balder. So Balder was often considered this, could argue, a pure son of Odin. There's a few stories about him. And in the Old Norse story, Balder is killed by Hothor, his brother, who is blind. And Hothor kills him because Loki tricked Hothor to do that. And he was killed by a mistletoe. So, and then when Balder's put on a pyre to be burnt, his wife, Nanna, comes along, sees his dead body, and dies from a broken heart. So quite a sad story. The whole thing is really sad, but he talks about then Balder going to the underworld and people trying to recover him. And they try to recover him and allow him back. But Hel, who is responsible for the underworld, says he can only come back if the whole world weeps for Balder. But one person doesn't weep, who we think is Loki in disguise, and so Balder doesn't come back. But the weeping and the going to the underworld is very much an agricultural motif. The story of Balder is a agricultural farming motif, so it was probably being told in northwestern Europe before Vikings were a thing, almost certainly. But Nanna is interesting because there's other things about Nanna, and one of them is that in a very old story of Hothor and Loki, probably the oldest story we have, both of them, Balder and Hothor, have seen Nanna and fallen in love with her. But Hothor, I think, had something to do with the underworld at the time, and he was not a nice person. He found out Balder's weaknesses and killed him. And that is the story, I think, behind Nanna and who she was. So she was a very beautiful woman, fought over. So let me just, any other notes I made on that? But yeah, that's it. And yeah, but again, there's another story. Then when he dies, she when Balder dies, he doesn't come back. So it's still an agricultural myth, and there is a myth of Balder from Saxo Grammaticus actually, and that is the story, if you ever read it, where we find out that Loki's name was also Fenrir. So if you know Old Norse stories and Fenrir the wolf, actually Loki's name was Fenrir, and the story goes that Fenrir had wolves. But we believe through poetic simplification, like over time, rather than saying Fenrir's wolf, the wolf took the name Fenrir, and that's why the wolf is called Fenrir. But we also see wolves called like Garma, who we believe could be the same wolf, and it's really different names. So that sort of explains that too. So I hope that hopefully that makes is interesting and makes some sense. And there's lots of chat still going on, right? So let me talk about the Mythology database for you. Let me just make sure I can log on to it, and then I can show you some wonderful things. So I've got a button here on my special computer. Boom. Does that work? No, that is not working. There we go. I have to do it the old-fashioned way. So if any of you use the Mythology database, you'll be sort of used to this now. This is a new sort of screen. But there's a few options on the side which you haven't seen yet. You may not have seen, unless you're a patron or YouTube member. I've gone through some of these. And some great things are happening. But one of the things that's happening is search myth themes. So if you're not familiar with myth themes and alike, I mean, let me come up. So when we want to compare stories, we have to find a way of objectively comparing them. Okay. And we use, or what is termed to be used, computational comparative mythology. And we use tools like phylogenetics as a method, a way of calculating the probability of stories being similar based on other things such as linguistic evolution and genetic evolution, which you can overlap over, where you can plot a story being told, and therefore you can see the probability of stories going in particular directions. For example, you wouldn't expect any stories that originated in Australia to end up in Scandinavia, as an example. And that's an extreme example, but to give you an idea. So how we objectively compare stories is by breaking them down into myth themes. Now, we have various catalogues that help us understand and categorize stories to compare them at the moment. We have something called the ATU, the Arnold Thompson Uther Index, or some people still use the AT, the Arnold Thompson Index. Uther came along and changed a few words. Some people think that added value, some people don't. But we have this, and so you have a catalogue. I haven't got the exact catalogue easily to hand, but I can show you. One second, here we go. So this is the Arnold Thompson book, I think. Stiff Thompson book. Let me live stream Bush. Right. So hope that may focus at some point. Yeah, there we go. I think so. And what that does is that basically says you look for something like, say, Doom. There's a word called Doom. If you wanted a story about Doom, you look at Doom and it will say Saint made Judge of Doom, CQ 173. And all these books have indexes on. Now you get the book, which relates to Q173, which is back up there. You can't quite see it. You'll just see a big mess, but I've got the Sift Officer books here and the Uther books there. So, because sometimes it's easier to manually check these things out. But that's how we used to do it. You had to do a lot of manual work. Then Bearskin came along, and Bearskin made a Bearskin analytical catalogue where he split narratives into motifs, and there's about 3,000 motifs split into about 13 or 14 categories. And that's really good. And I've leveraged his work and I translated it and fixed a lot and put some geospatial data in as part of some of the data in the Mythology database. But the advantage with motifs over the ATU is very specific. You have to know exactly what you're looking for. But if you do, you can get the exact match. The motifs in Bearskin are more generic, which helps. But unless you know the words that are being used by Bearskin, you still have trouble finding what you're looking for. But it is a brilliant repository. If you go on the Mythology database and you look for texts and they come from Bearskin, I do link to the database, and you can go to the Russian source and translate it and find out exactly what was said as well. So Bearskin has done so much for work in mythology and folklore. You cannot understate it. But then I saw that there were issues with this. And when we actually do compare stories, we try to use myth themes. And myth themes are small sections of story that are phrased such that it's difficult to mistranslate them or confuse them if they cross linguistic or cultural boundaries. And that's really important, because when a story crosses a linguistic boundary, that's when it's more likely to change the most. So if a story travels today from France to, let's say, it's hard to think, like France to China, because there's significant linguistic difference, that story may change to be able to be told in China, and so you could lose some of the flavour of the story from France. But if you break it down into myth themes, hopefully each myth theme, when translated, retains its value. So it's really important, these myth themes, that you have them. The trouble is, whilst we have 3,000 motifs or 3,500 motifs and alike, myth themes are far more granular. And so let me go back to the database to put this in context for you. So you can now browse Mythic, or you will soon. By the end of August, you should all be able to do this. But you should be able to browse myth themes. So I'm calculate these myth themes. I had to use an AI engine to do this, because the amount of work, if we'd done manually, would have probably taken 10 to 15 years for a number of people. Instead, it's literally taken, I would say, probably 3,000 hours of compute time. But if you go down, I currently have 210,000 myth themes in here. When I finished, they're probably about 300,000, which is just 1% of the number I originally had. I've worked really hard to try and get these down. But basically, if you look, we've got the hero's journey here. That's a well-known myth theme. Things. So we now can actually have myth themes for stories. And you may say, well, that's okay, John. So what? So if you're looking for stories that are similar, how can that help me? Well, what you will also soon have is access to, or most of you will have, I don't know if I can make it for free people just yet because there's a cost involved in this, but we have this advanced search, which now also will allow semantic search, which means that if you want to search for, let's say, a big elephant, it will also pick up large elephant or huge mammoth. They should all come back into part of the search. So the search can be more woolly. But let's say you want to search for dragon, which is fine. But let's also say you want to search for dragon, but has a myth theme of hero's journey. So hopefully you can see that. So you can search for all narratives with the word dragon in it, which you're familiar with, but now can say, actually limit that down to those which just have a hero's journey myth theme. So not even a motif, more granular. And if you search for the narratives now, and bear in mind, we have hundreds of thousands of narratives and hundreds of thousands of myth themes, you will now get a map of all the dragon stories that are part of a hero's journey, which is just brilliant anyway. But then you get the stories, which you know about, and like Beowulf, this sort of hero's journey type story with dragons that you're all familiar with. But let's pick out something. In fact, no, could we do that? Let's risk it. Let's read the English. So here we have a Beowulf, the story of Beowulf. Anyway, at oh no, that hasn't worked actually. Why has that not worked? Let me try something else. To do. Oh yes, it did work. I've just did something slightly wrong. Sorry, my mistake. I'll go back to Beowulf to prove it. Right, so you get Beowulf, and at the moment, at the bottom of Beowulf, it says these are all the myth themes that are in Beowulf, which is again really good, really good. If you're doing studying of myths, you want to know what's going on. That's fine. But now you're going to say, but what stories are like Beowulf? What stories have those myth themes in? Because that's something we haven't really been easily able to do. And the mythology database has split the narratives of Bearskin into individual narratives, and so you can sort of do that with the motifs. But what you'll soon be able to do, and none of you can do this yet, but I can because I have superpowers. I can type a little bit of a URL in there, and hopefully this is going to take a long time because we're searching through tons and tons of data, literally millions of permutations and combinations, and I've never done a story with this big. So what it now does is this will come, say, in September. It will now show you stories. Ignore the untitled narrative. I'm fixing that as we go in, but show you stories that have matching myth themes. So the man who became rich through a dream, Bridget Cursed, has 8 matching myth themes. Has 9, so it's an 89% match. There's a couple here that are the same. In fact, we could view this narrative, see what that is, and it will hopefully. Oh yes. So there you go. Oh, of all the stories I could have brought up, I apologise. Anyway, the story most like Beowulf is the monstrous man organ. This will go on live stream fails. So let's whiz that out there. I can only apologise. Oh dear, I'm slightly embarrassed. But there you go. You get all the myth themes and all stories that are like it. So I will quickly leave that monstrous piece of flesh alone. So back to serious things. Oh my word, I'm so embarrassed. Very sorry. I'm lost now. Right, where do we begin? Right, so what you can now do is easily find stories with the same myth themes, which if you're a folklore researcher, comparative mythologist, anything like that, you can do. Well, you saw it in 10, 15 seconds, you can find stories like that. Something that would have taken you hours, days, maybe weeks of research. The database within probably a month, excuse me, and I'll have to roll this out a bit slowly to make sure it works and doesn't break with everybody using it, can now do that research for you, which is literally world changing, um, or research changing for folklore. And so, I am really appreciative of all the support you all give me. When I started this channel, this database wasn't a plan. I had my own sort of research repository. But as time went on, I thought, this will make sense to share that. And then it just grew and grew. And with all your support, I don't do YouTube for money, and I don't have sponsorship. I do this because I love doing it, and whilst I can always get away with just doing this when I want rather than have a regular video every week or two. But the support you've given me on Patreon and YouTube members and the live super chats and things like that have just made this possible. It would not have happened without your support. So just give yourselves a pat on the back for all of you who come and ask questions and cheer me on, hit the like button and just like what I do. I appreciate that, because this database for my own research has just changed how I work now, and it will change so many other people's way of working. So really, thank you so much for that. And so YouTube members and patrons will get access to these features as soon as they're ready. I've got a few people just testing out the beta. That should be before the end of August, and I say by the beginning of September, I'll try and make these features available for all of you, or as much as I can. There may be limited use because there's a significant cost involved in running some of these things. But thank you. Let me try and catch up on questions. Oh dear, I could have guessed this was going to come up. So, Velda Glass wants to know, anyone else want a Patreon exclusive about the monstrous man part story? Well, why not? I'll do that in a couple of weeks. That's my promise to you. I should be able to find that story again, and we can do that. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's absolutely, as I say, that's crazy. What have I popped up? Thank you very much, Teresa. I appreciate that. Accidentally clicked your message, but that was a very nice message to accidentally click on. Thank you. I try. Right, so just to be clear, anyone can use the Mythology database. It is free to use. You just have to register with an email address. The reason you do that is to stop AI programs scraping all the data. They need email addresses, and then I can see how much people are using and how they're using it. And if any meet a particular pattern, I can ban them. So anyone can use the Mythology database. In terms of advanced search and myth themes, that is very limited now. By the end of August, myth themes and advanced search should be available to YouTube members and patrons. Non-YouTube members and patrons can use the search, and can view motifs and do lots of great work. Better than any other tool that I'm aware of out there, and it's still free. And I say, come September, then you should be able to have access to those features, although they may be a little bit more limited in terms of the amount of times you can use them, because I say there is a cost for this. And whilst I try and put everything I get from Patreon and YouTube back into this, there is a balance to make sure that I can keep this running. Doing what I've done has literally tripled the cost of running this. But I think it's for a good cause, and I think it's going to change things. So I just want to clear that up based on some of the comments. And there's some weird questions coming up now. Right. So where do we go next? I'm just trying to see other questions. We've answered all those people. Right. So someone talked about making a video out of pie. So we're near the end of the questions. So someone asked a question: should I make a video about the religions that came out of the pie religion? So what I'm doing at the moment, if you haven't seen, is I'm got some videos on the pantheon of Proto-Indo-Europeans and where it came from at the beginning sort of time, and how it changed and why it changed. And I made a video 2 or 3 weeks ago about storm gods and sky gods, and which one became the chief god and why that is. And we find that many pantheons got rid of one or the other, but whoever remained had storm god properties because that was considered really important. And my next video on that, which will be the video I release after the flood myth, will be on the Earth Mother, the dawn goddess, probably Uranus, who was a female night consort of the Sky Father, possibly, and talk about the evolution of that. So when you do that, when I talk about those, I do talk about their positions in the pantheons of the religions that came from the core Indo-European religion. So hopefully that sort of answers that, unless you wanted a more modern take, such as Zoroastrianism and Hinduism and things like that. But that's a bit more complicated. I would say my friend Simon Davis, who has a Mythopia channel, he doesn't do much on YouTube. He does post quite a bit on Twitter, and he writes a lot on Patreon. He has created something called the Tree of Religion. I've made videos with him about it. It's a huge tree, a massive piece of work. It's taken him years. If you want to understand religion's influence and the like, that's a really good high-level view. Well, it's just high level. It's really granular because there's so many on there. But yeah, it's a broad view without going into the details of actually percentage split and the alike and what influenced where. But that's a really good picture. So shout out to Simon for doing that. So with that, I can close the questions because I think they're all the advanced questions I've got. If there are more, then I apologise. But my lack of organisation skills have failed in terms of noting them down. So let me have a look at what questions we've got. I've got my little iPad down here, which I can read more easily than what's going on the screen. So I don't know where to start. Pi, Proto-Indo-European language. So Pi, yes. Pi stands for Proto-Indo-European. It is a hypothetical language. It doesn't mean it didn't exist. It means that it is a language that we have no record of. We can only theorize its existence due to the sort of footmarks it has left in history. It's much like looking at a person walking across snow, or not looking. If you see snow with footprints in it, you know someone has walked through the snow, but that person may not be around. So that's a bit like the Proto-Indo-European language. You see these footprints, but we don't have the person who made them. We can just see how fast they were walking, how big their shoes were, that sort of thing. We've got another question: myths, mushrooms, and tea. So Joshua, what's up with myths, mushrooms, and tea? So if you're not familiar with myths, mushrooms, and tea, it's a project Simon from Mythopia and I started. So me and Simon have been friends for quite a long time, a number of years now, and I talk to him once every week or 2 weeks, and we just chatted online like this about various things. We'd, didn't record it or anything. Just we had some great ideas banging around because my interests outside of mythology. I'm a keen mathematician. I've read a lot about in popular science. I've tried to understand quantum mechanics. I love maths and behavioural economics with a passion, and psychology. And Simon has his interests very much in certainly at the moment looking at consciousness of the universe and other sort of more, I guess, fringe subjects. And we just had these conversations bouncing off each other, and not serious academic debate, but just stuff. And we thought, actually, these conversations are so interesting. Why don't we record them and make them into a video series, a podcast, Myths, Mushrooms, and Tea? So that's what we did. And then we started again. We went on for we've made about 6 recordings, then we stopped for a year. I'm not really sure why, just the time and the like. Then we started up again a few months ago. Then I had a situation where I needed some time away, as I had lots of loss in my close circle of friends and family, and I just didn't have the time to do it. And so we haven't really got back into the swing of things. Simon's really busy at the moment with personal things as well. So I do talk to him on a fortnightly basis, give or take a week, but hopefully one day we'll try again. It wasn't really getting the traction we wanted, and we thought we'd give it a few more turns. But it may just be easier to maybe have Simon come along to a live stream like this once in a while, and we bounce off each other. So that's what's happened to myths, mushrooms, and tea. So thank you for that question. Questions. Right, if you've got any questions, if you put them in the comments with the word question at the front or a big Q, it'll be easier to spot. So there we go. Okay, right. So here's an interesting one. I'll give you my shout out. Someone's asked, is Myth Vision dubious? So Myth Vision is run by Derek. He was probably the first big YouTuber to give me a shout out. So I like him as a friend. We've spoken offline quite a lot, and he supported me, as I say, a lot. I had a bit of trouble recently. Someone was falsely accusing me of stuff, and he found out who that was, and that helped me sort out a few things there too. Wasn't a nice situation. So yeah, he's a good person, but he runs Myth Vision as a business. You have to remember that. So I'm running this as I love teaching, I love mythology, so I have no pressures. Derek has pressures to produce content, but I find he gets great people in. He talks about great subjects. He's really up to his game on production. So I don't think there's anything dubious in his work at all. It's just if you like his style or not. I think it's just down to that. But as I say, Derek has been really supportive of me, and I've always appreciated that. And I remember talking to Neil from Gnostic Informant a lot as well when he was starting up. He hasn't spoken to me much actually for the last couple of years. I don't know why. But I really like his work and how he's progressed with the Greek myths and that's really interesting. So I think they're fine people. I know they had issues over some of their guests and their guests' views, but providing you're clear on that and you don't support their views and you're clear on that, then that's fine. Sometimes academics have strange views. Everybody has many people have strange views, but you have to be careful. But providing you're clear on where you stand on that, I think, if you need their academic opinion on something, then there's a balance to be had, but you should be able to leverage that. So any questions? Right. SD, I see you got a question. Can I wonk it up? I haven't read the question, so I hope it's okay. Question. Why did major spiritual beliefs turn from polytheism and goddesses-based to monotheistic, male-centered spiritual cultures? Well, it didn't everywhere. We're really talking about European and Abrahamic, I think. There are we. So why do we go from polytheism to monotheism? I think that's just the rise of the storm god, and it's a natural progression from everything being sacred to society having more. Well, it is a reflection of society. We went from a society where hunter-gatherers did whatever they want, sort of thing, to having social communities, which probably would have had hierarchies, but broad hierarchies, to a world ruled by kings and the like. And if there is one king on the land, well, there should be one king in the heavens, so to speak. So I think that's probably a significant driver because of how we see the influence of society. So where society had a matriarchal view, then you probably would have got goddesses instead of gods. But that's really a society view because, as I say, religious thought is a cultural reflection. And so wherever the culture's thinking, you find religion changes to be like that, usually. Right, I've got another question from George Frisbee. Do you think Siberia could be where pies came from? So we do have genetic analysis of people who spoke Proto-Indo-European. Obviously, Proto-Indo-European isn't influenced by your genes, influenced by your DNA, but there would have been some influence from people who came from Siberia into the Indo-European gene pool, and we can tell some of that without looking at gene pool because of the myths they told. There seem to be some of those beliefs about bears and things like that that seem to have flowed down into the Indo-European. So where we see stories, how can I put it? So stories in the Americas and in Eurasia, you could make an assumption they came from Asia, either Southeast Asia or Central Asia or Siberia. So there's almost certainly some myths in there too. So there is some influence from Siberia, but it's not a significant genetic influence that I'm aware of. No, they're closer hunter-gatherers that were closer, and agricultural farmers that are part of that. Question: what can we learn from myths from the immortal art? Well, so in terms of divine revelation, absolutely nothing, because, as I say, it's just cultural reflection. In terms of historical events, absolutely quite a lot. You can learn how people thought and believed. Myths are a reflection of, say, not only culture, but society and the landscape. So what was going on in myths helps us build up a picture of how the world was to the people that were telling those myths. And myths also contain sacred truths. They are religious stories. They have gods in them. But sacred truths aren't the same as facts. Now, sacred truths to people who believe the gods that the sacred truths are about may believe them to be facts, but anybody outside that circle would look in there and say, no, they're not facts. They're your religious belief. Facts or something else, such as how the world was made. Some people believe it may have been from a giant, as we've talked about in the European myths. Some people believe God said, let there be a planet, there was a planet. But most people, there's science fact about a process over billions of years. So that's really what we learn from myths. It's really about how society saw the world. That's really interesting because it can add a layer of, I guess, humanity to data. And I'll talk about this in the flood myth video, where that you could just use geological data to understand if there was a worldwide flood or floods in various places. But in prehistoric terms, that's very basic, sterile information. If you then apply a myth over it, you get an idea more of the landscape and what was going on and why it was going on. And we can use myths and changes in mythings to understand how many waves of migration happened into the Americas, for example. We see 4 distinct flavors of myth types going into the States, going into the Americas, I should say. And so there were 4 waves of people, but then genetic analysis came along later and said, oh, did you know there were 4 sets of people went into Americas? And we can say, yeah, we saw that from the myths, although I can understand people thinking, they're just stories. So they, what evidence do they really have? How conclusive is it? But the data we have is pretty solid, although we tend to be probabilistic in a determination. And so, whilst I may get carried away and say this is happened, there will be a probabilistic number behind it, and I tend to quote the most probable outcome based on the data we had. The poop question: after Atra Hayes, why did subsequent versions of the flood myth in the ancient Near East omit references to the hunger and thirst of the gods during the flood? So that's just the development of society. So what we see many stories, not just flood myths and not just in the Near East. We see it in India, in the Mahabharata. We see it in Homer's work of stories where the gods are annoyed with people and want to kill them all and have this sort of a feast. There's always a sort of feast as well around it that the gods have. That seems to be a consistent set of myth themes in these stories. Why did they go? I think there must have been a societal change that stopped that. Without looking at it in specific detail, it'd be hard to say the exact cause, but yeah, I mean, what people don't really realize is that there are these consistent themes that the Iliad. I say this a lot. People think the Iliad's about the defeat of Troy or Achilles, but old stories, even in the Middle Ages and before, they always told you the plot at the start of the story. This story is this, and this is what's going to happen. So so you could probably fall asleep and not listen to 2 weeks of Homer's epic. But at the start of the Iliad, it says Zeus thought the world was basically too busy and wanted to kill lots of people. That's what the story is about. Sorry, diverted there, but that's here we see these myth themes, this hunger and thirst of the gods, need for feasts, and the anger with too many people are consistent themes, and it's a society. It must have been a societal change in the Near East that caused that, and that may have been due to the rise of other cultures. Right, where else? Do we have any other questions? What is the time? I've only been on for an hour. Okay, that's not too bad. That's okay. To poop. Any other questions? I can whiz back a bit. Let me go. Cool. You all have been talking loads. I've been having good chat conversations. I've got a question here. Is Trogdor a true dragon? I don't know who Trogdor is. Am I missing something? And the poop asked the question really early on. Sorry, the poop. I didn't see that because I was very much focused on this. It's always in past, whizzing really quickly. I can't see anything obvious. There is a question. Let me just whiz back to the bottom. Right. Okay. Well. Okay. No more questions then. Well, I think then we can call it a day. Maybe this was just to say hello and to let you know what's going on. Answering some of the questions early, and so you do Mythology database, which I say I'm really proud of and really thankful for, and I think, I say, in the next month it will allow lots more work to carry on. I can rework some of my older videos and make new videos on myths that we didn't realize were linked, or possibly linked. So really looking forward to that. Right. Thanks. We need to do an art dialogue again. The invitation, the immortal art. If we can. Okay. Hello, Quick, and very good channel. I'm new here, so hello everybody from our Pete. Right. So with that, sorry. Yes, it's that's it really. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry about the man organ thing. I'm sure everybody's okay with that. These things happen in mythology. Please don't clip that. Oh dear. So so this is the end. Sorry, Roger Pete. Welcome here. Do you say you're the new one? You're new here. Yeah, but we're just winding up. I think I've answered lots of questions today, showing people the Mythology database. As I say, is free to use. You can use it now. Just some of the things are limited. With that, again, all my chats, anyone can talk. I saw someone say they don't watch my videos anymore because they're members only. That is not true. I do live streams. I do big videos, which will go to everyone. For YouTube members and patrons, I do make occasional short videos just to say thank you and to keep conversations going about different things. I'll make a vlog normally once a week. I've been a bit lax in the last couple of weeks, which everybody can watch. So I do try and keep this open. So yes, but if you have any thoughts or comments, how can I make this better, I'm always happy to listen. And I love, say, teaching, love mythology, and hopefully you, well, it looks like all of you really do love it too. So, with that, thanks, SD. Lots of thanks from everyone. Yeah, with that, say next week or two, Flood Myth video is a big one. Take lots of cups of tea / coffee or any drink that you find super. I think it's probably going to be an hour and a half video. I'll do one on the Earth Mother and associated deities after that, and I might slip in a live stream in the middle there, and then I've got ideas for many other videos. So there's no shortage of videos. I think we worked out the other day we had about 6 or 7 years worth of videos to make still. So this is going to carry on for quite some time. And so, sorry, XCap, you just missed me. Yes, sorry. But you can watch it back. It was answering lots of questions and looking at mythology database. So with that, thank you all for your support. That's all I can really say. Really appreciate everything. Appreciate you all being here, talking. If you all want to hit the like button now, if you haven't already, that would be really good, because that'll make loads of people come here and then miss me and be sad. But I'll be here for the next one then. But thank you for everything. Just happy to be here talking to you. I can't ask for more. So thank you. And with that, have a lovely Sunday if it's in the middle of the day for you. Have a lovely Monday if you're in Central Europe or beyond. And I'll speak to you all very, very soon. You take care, and thank you again for all your support. Toodle pip.